hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
How's it going?
I'm doing fantastically today. Thank you so much. Sam, you and I have been talking recently about just what it means to be successful in terms of society and economy. And it seems as though those economies and societies that obviously have rule of law and strict adherence to strong individual property rights, as well as really kind of freedom of thought and expression, tend to do better than those that don't have those things. After all, the dissemination of knowledge is what led to the Renaissance back at the Middle Ages, and then it leads to just overall scientific research and economic activities. People share ideas. Unfortunately, it seems as though there are elements out there in society that, for whatever reason, really kind of want to squash decent debate. And understanding it, I would say that the debate is actually economically advantageous. But I think a perfect example of this, Sam, just seems to be what's going on with the Spotify podcaster, if you will, Joe Rogan. I mean, have you been reading about this guy and people trying to cancel him out and complaining about him? And Sam, I'm beginning to think that maybe not everyone even knows about Joe Rogan. They just assume he has to be some kind of alt-right guy if people are wanting to cancel him out.
Well, that is definitely kind of the narrative that has come out from all this, is that he is spewing crazy alt-right, right-wing ideas, which is not the case. I mean, it's not the case at all either.
You know, what little I have read about Joe Rogan, and I've listened to the podcast a few times, I would say it's amazingly libertarian in nature and even borderline on relatively liberal. It's certainly not a MAGA type of podcast where people are just espousing just all kinds of make America great again. It really does focus on sort of obscure people coming on with ideas that might not meet the mainstream media, but I guess part of the reason why he's been canceled out is due to the fact that he has been pretty straightforward with how he feels about COVID-19, understanding that he's had COVID-19, but his positions for younger people that they might not need to take it as seriously as older people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the biggest thing about Rogan is how he approaches people that he has on his show, and I think that's a lot of where the pushback comes from. Is people, it seems like a lot of the media now doesn't want one opinion to even be out there, whether it's right or wrong. It seems like there is the discourse is something that people don't want anymore.
Well, to that extent, if you've been following this story at all in the news, probably know that let's call it classic rocker, although I was never a huge fan of his music, Neil Young, demanded to be taken off of Spotify because Joe Rogan, that's his primary podcast platform. This has been followed up by Joni Mitchell, Niels Lofgren, and I think even British royal people have denounced Joe Rogan. And just it seems as though when the hits keep coming, they keep on coming, and people just kind of jump on the bandwagon, assuming that there is a potential narrative when there really isn't a narrative. Kind of like that Rittenhouse kid up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Shot few white guys shooting white guys, and next thing you know, people were marching in the streets, which really didn't fit the narrative. And I'm wondering whether or not Joe Rogan really fits the narrative for cancel culture.
Oh, I think for what it's become, I think so.
Okay, will you elaborate on that, Sam?
I think it's what I was saying. It's the lack of discourse. If anybody should be canceled that's on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, it would be the guest that is coming on with those opinions if they disagreed. And I still don't think that should be the case. But how is the person who is allowing people to come on and have their opinion and genuinely engage in a discourse, ask thoughtful questions, how is that wrong now? That's the part that is so head-scratching to me. It'd be one thing, I still don't agree with it, if someone is blaring their opinion and it's pretty wrong and people don't want that person on. I'll push back on that, but that's for another day. To push back against the person who is allowing people to have a conversation and a discourse and learn is shocking to me. And it's something that I think clearly people want. People want to learn through this. I mean, it has over 100 million monthly users. I mean, it's blown up. People now know him from the podcast more so than anything else he's done. And it's something that people clearly like and people clearly want to, digest their knowledge through these kind of platforms.
You mentioned all the 100 million people and all that stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, Spotify awarded, or paid Joe Rogan some $100 million in order to be the podcast platform, his platform for his podcast. I'm not certain, but I'd be willing to bet you, Sam, a steak dinner. I'm generally out of a steak dinner.
Yeah, you owe a couple of those.
But I bet you a steak dinner. Joe Rogan makes Spotify a heck of a lot more money each month than Nils Lofgren, Joni Mitchell, and maybe even Neil Young combined. Your thoughts on
I
that?
100% think that.
So when someone does something like that, and again, let me be cynical here, and I'm apt to be, or prone to be cynical. When someone like a Neil Young becomes very public, and take me off of Spotify unless you get rid of Joe Rogan, I'm wondering whether or not there is some sort of self-promotion that's going on there. Same thing with Joni Mitchell, same thing with Nils Lofgren. When someone goes that public with something about that, apparently not really completely understanding who the individual is or what his overall message is, just focusing on one thing and saying, take me off, I'm wondering whether or not that's just, look at me. Look at me. Don't forget, okay, I'm on Spotify, but I'm also on Apple Music. iTunes, whatever they call it now.
Amazon.
I'm also there. Don't forget about me, I wrote Cinnamon Girl,
I don't even know what that is.
Okay, fair enough. But what do you think about that? That some people actually don't even know what they're canceling, don't even know what they're yelling about censorship for, but what they're actually doing is jumping on the bandwagon so they can get some kind of notoriety or some kind of props that here they have done their virtue signaling, look at me.
It's concerning, and I think people should be asking the questions, why are you so afraid of someone making their own opinion? What is so concerning about that?
Listen,
he's a guy who said he was probably going to vote for Bernie Sanders in the 2020 Democratic primary. He is not a...
As a matter of fact, I believe he also endorsed Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard. He is...
He's all over the board. He's not a MAGA red hat wearing type guy. However, if you were just picking up the newspaper, that's showing my age right there, picking up the newspaper.
I don't even know where I would get a newspaper anymore.
You're picking up
the pig, go pick one up.
If you're picking up the newspaper for the first time, you read this whole story, you would probably think that Joe Rogan was alt-right, wouldn't you?
Sure.
Yeah,
who else gets canceled?
So that's what I'm thinking about this whole cancel deal. Trying to censor people for what they say and believe. Ultimately, it's an infringement on First Amendment rights, all that. But even more than that, it's not good for society to squelch opposing views. Because if you don't have opposing views, you don't learn. You don't get to formulate your own opinion. Right?
Yeah.
And so you have to, if you don't have opposing views, there's only one narrative.
And it creates extremism.
Without a doubt. So if you only have the one view, you aren't thinking for yourself, it creates extremism, and then bad things happen. So we might not like what someone has to say, but if they're not out there saying it, then then I'm only sitting here listening to this. That's going to skew my worldview, and we saw that. And we see that in dictatorships. And I'm not saying Neil Young demanding Joe Rogan get off Spotify is, next up, dictatorship. But even so, it's that sort of thought process which does get down there, where we're canceling people out for having an opposing view, where we're stepping on or kind of just barely kind of making infringements on the First Amendment, all that type of stuff. That is the slippery slope when we are yelling and screaming against people for having a valid opinion, and that is the type of stuff which crushes societies and actually crushes economic activity. We've seen this over and over again, and throughout history this happens. And yet when we have people sitting there, we got to cancel this person. Now it seems like really your generation and Gen Y, the millennials, seem to be more okay with this than maybe some of the older generations. Do you think there is a generational difference here?
I don't know, because I think
you might not be the right person.
Yeah,
to ask
that's kind of where I'm getting at. I don't know if me and my friends are the people to ask about this. But,
okay, let me call someone in St. Paul. You know,
but it is people outside of my generation that are seemingly
well, you're right about that.
To be the ones doing the canceling.
You mean Neil Young isn't a Gen Z?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I could tell you one song of his. So.
I just named
Heart
that.
of Gold.
Well, Cinnamon Girl.
Yeah. See, I didn't know if you were talking about him or Jody, whatever her name. I mean,
all right, name a Niels Lofgren song.
I don't even know who that is. So,
he wants Joe Rogan off of Spotify.
sounds like the guy from The Karate Kid, Dolph.
Is he? I don't think Dolph Lundgren.
Take him off Spotify.
Dolph Lundgren wasn't. I don't think he was a Karate Kid. I think he was.
It's Rocky.
Rocky 4. I don't think Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid, would have stood much of a chance against.
Nonetheless.
Dolph Lundgren. Fair enough. So I mean, what do you though? I mean, seriously. I mean, all kidding aside, although I can't get Dolph Lundgren beating Ralph Macchio to a pulp out of my head. What do you think the end outcome is of all of this? It seems like it's not going away. People demanding cancellation, woke culture, people not even understanding the narratives, but demanding people shut up.
Well, I think what it takes is people saying, no, we'd rather have Joe Rogan experience than we would Neil Young, and clearly that's one. Spotify, without a doubt, said they're pretty much sticking with Joe Rogan, and if you want to leave, sayonara. I mean, they paid this guy $100 million. He has tens of millions of monthly listeners, and he brings in a ton of revenue where I think the artists get paid like 0.003 cents per song played. So it is a much more profitable part of their business. And I think that's what people want, and I think that's part of why you probably saw Spotify. If they were going to lose tens of hundreds of millions of dollars by keeping Joe Rogan on, they probably looked the other. They probably may have not done what they did.
Well, who owns Spotify?
Spotify.
And where's Spotify headquartered?
I think California.
I'm not exactly sure, but it'd be interesting to see what happens if more people decide, or more performers decide, hey, I'm going to go after these people. And the thing is, strangely enough, Spotify is not headquartered here in the United States. It wasn't founded in the United States. It's founded in Sweden. You might have noticed that nice little pause while Sam and I both looked at our magic boxes to figure out where it is. And while you wouldn't think of Sweden as necessarily being some overly conservative country, and it's not, however, it doesn't seem as though it has developed the same type of woke culture that has been prevalent in the United States and the United Kingdom. As a result, probably still open for a little bit more discourse, and ultimately I think that's a healthy thing. So I guess ultimately what Spotify is saying is, in no uncertain terms, money talks, and Neil Young
walks.
As someone once said down here, down in Alabama, you find some Neil Young fans, but not a ton. He was pretty critical of the South in general with Southern Man. It's not a bad tune, but I mean, a lot of people didn't like it when it came out. Well, actually, someone said this to me the other day. Well, I hope Neil Young will remember, Spotify don't need him around anyhow. And ultimately, that comes down really, no matter how much, and they're kind of starting to conclude things up. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when it boils on down, and whether woke people realize it or not, whether or not cancellation culture realize it or not, ultimately it comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, it comes down to economic activity. It comes down to the bottom line. It comes down to really people being able to make money. Now, in some cultures like North Korea, I guess that really doesn't matter. Here in the United States, I don't think we're there yet. And so far, you cancel someone out here, you shut down some assistant editor at Vogue or Cosmopolitan like they do, it really doesn't impact anything. However, when a visible person like a Neil Young or someone like that says, get rid of Joe Rogan, Spotify, it's not an assistant editor somewhere. It's not the morning producer of the coffee minute on the local television channel. This is a money generator.
The consumers prefer consumer preference is to Joe Rogan
And
over pretty much anything else
without
on
a doubt.
Spotify.
And so I think moving forward, we're going to start seeing more and more of this type of stuff as people try to cancel out moneymakers. Up till now, cancel out people that really just don't matter that much. And, Jeffrey Tambor, we canceled him out. Well, guess what? Find someone else to do what Jeffrey Tambor does. There aren't a ton of people that are doing what Joe Rogan does as effectively.
I would say there's none. I mean, it's the best, it's the most listened to podcast in the world, I believe.
So moving forward, the people that want to maintain cancel culture, want to maintain wokeism, need to understand economics will always come first. You can cancel out those people who really aren't worth it. That's pretty easy to do. However, it becomes much harder when people are dropping money to the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, and Sammy and I both look at the world through an economic lens, basically it all comes down to economics in some form or fashion.
And that goes back to consumer preferences and consumer choices a lot of the times.
Well,
Most of the time.
There you go. We're kindred spirits again, Sam. Trading perspectives, I don't know. Maybe next week when Courtney is back, she'll help us trade some perspectives. But in any event, we always love to hear from you all. So if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in hearing more, reading more of what we have to say or how we think, please go to oakworth.com and take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of interesting information. With that, Sam, you have any more thoughts on this topic today?
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.